Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Liz Garcia and I am the manager for this event. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. You have complete control over your console. You can minimize, maximize, or change the size of any widget at any time. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Your lines are muted, so please submit all questions using the Q&A chat window and we will answer them at the end of this presentation. If we do not address your question during this broadcast, we will respond via email after the event. Use the document link for some helpful resources on today's topic. If you need technical help, please press the question mark icon. And we appreciate your feedback, so please take the survey using the clipboard icon before you exit this event. And that's all the announcements we have, so we're ready to get started. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, IT, IoT, and OT. Oh my, learn to see and secure it all with Forescout and Ixia. My name is Liz Garcia and I am the moderator for today's event. And I will let our presenters introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Tim Jones. I'm actually the Senior Director of Systems Engineering with Forescout for Public Sector. I'm excited to be speaking with you guys today, obviously about some visibility in the space that we're seeing, kind of the emergence of IT, OT, and how we gain so much more insight around the visibility of these devices with critical partners like Ixia. I'm actually going to introduce Dennis here as well, who's joining me. Dennis?
Hello everyone. My name is Dennis Carpio. Thanks for your time today. And I am the Senior Director of Business Development at Ixia. Kisaite Business, and in my role, I manage the technology partner ecosystem on the security side of things, and I work very closely with our partners to develop joint solutions, and we're happy to talk today about our joint solution with Forescout around building intelligent visibility in your IT and OT environments. Thanks. So some of the things that we're going to walk through today in this session, we'll quickly introduce the two organizations, Ixia and Forescout, and we'll talk about some trends that will inevitably make the next breach something that is not a if, but when. In this changing landscape of industrial and IoT and everything happening with the edge, the attack surface has grown ever more so than it ever has before. So how do we secure that in areas of things that we can't see? We're going to talk a little bit about best practices and how to do that. Ultimately, the information here that we're going to walk through, optimizing security operations and building your visibility across your entire infrastructure, will ultimately lead you to information that will help you become more successful within your organization. So with that, let's get into it. Ixia was founded in 1997 and is a leader in network test and network visibility solutions. In 2017, Ixia was acquired by Keysight Technologies. Some of you may know the history of Keysight actually started 80 years ago as HP. They started the organization as a test and measurement company, and in 2014 became and rebranded Keysight Technologies. Today, Keysight is a $4 billion global test and measurement provider. Ixia adds that layer 2 to 7 test capability along with that security monitoring, which we're going to be talking about today, to help IT organizations deal with the growing landscape of IoT and OT environments.
Thanks, Dennis. This is Tim Jones with Forescout. I wanted to provide a little bit of background around who is Forescout. Obviously, we started as a company several years ago. Most people are aware of Forescout in terms of their network access control or NAC capabilities. We learned very early on, though, that without visibility that we were having a hard time taking full control in terms of orchestrating with other tools in the enterprise. A lot of our customers were discovering a lot of devices that they weren't aware of prior to
deploying ForScout. We have over 3,300 customers in about 80 different countries worldwide, and we're in a lot of the large areas, including government, finance, healthcare. Some of the things that our customers really do appreciate from a ForScout platform perspective is our time to value. They find that the deployment of ForScout seems very seamless, and they're gaining a lot of insight in terms of what's on their enterprise. We have over 8 million devices in our device cloud today. Some of our largest customers include device counts of over 2 million endpoints on a single deployment. And currently ForScout has about 65 million total devices in its capacity that we've sold to customers today. Great. So one of the things I wanted to make sure I talked about from a ForScout perspective are 3 trends that we think are going to make the next breach kind of inevitable for most organizations. The first thing that we're seeing is a growth in the number of devices and the platforms that these devices come in on. We're seeing a huge number of new device operating systems. In fact, by the time 2020, we think that there will be over 30 billion IP-based devices, most of them on platforms or in operating systems that agents don't support. These are operating systems or software-based devices that in traditional IT that we used to be able to use agent-based solutioning on no longer is able to support. The next major trend that we're seeing is obviously edge and cloud device computing. We're seeing a real proliferation in terms of the data center evolving into the cloud, and obviously we're seeing new and evolving edge networks connecting multiple device locations coming across all different types of access points. Your enterprise has expanded, right? The concept around an environment with multiple vendors is a reality, and obviously we're seeing the decentralization around a lot of management capabilities in these organizations. The third trend that we're obviously seeing and tracking from a ForScout perspective is the OT-IT convergence. This is creating kind of a new risk for most organizations. The information technology, or what was traditionally your corporate headquarters environment, is now being connected potentially with areas that had never traditionally been an IP-enabled environment. The operational technologies are being brought into the environment, and there's no longer that physical separation. They're no longer firewalled off from most environments. IT or IoT are starting to show up more and more regularly within our environments. This creates a new threat. Obviously, as cyber security experts, we're looking kind of at that assessment of high-risk, vulnerable systems, and these are where we're starting to see a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of unpatched operating systems or devices show up. From a ForScout platform perspective, the concept is simple. You can't secure what you can't see. This has been said multiple times across multiple organizations, but to understand kind of the security implications regarding the continuous discovery and classification of assessments, every time one of these devices connects, we need to be able to understand where it is and what it is in real time. ForScout's looked and evaluated this in multiple environments, and we've identified some real business challenges as well as some technical challenges that most organizations face. Obviously, at the enterprise, on average, we're seeing more and more of these types of devices connecting. We've explained this a couple times over, but the concern from a technical perspective is obviously the agents that we've trusted or the agents that we've deployed across these enterprises are no longer able to be supported on these devices. Within every one of these enterprises, these devices that are connecting, oftentimes they're not known, right? We're not sure whether they should be there or if they're part of my internal network. How do I know that I should trust or understand what those devices are? From a technical perspective, a lot of times these devices have little information, right? The attributes or information around the classification of these these assets just doesn't exist as they start to connect to the enterprise. And the third area that we're seeing from a business challenge perspective, we see a lot of IT and regulatory devices come under fire when auditors come through. Oftentimes we're looking at kind of the failed audit as a real eye-opener for most organizations. They thought they understood what was in the enterprise, but as they started to kind of take a look at it, they realized that there was no single source of truth in understanding all the devices that were connecting to the enterprise at any given moment. So starting with a comprehensive visibility platform or understanding is going to be a cornerstone from a security perspective, right? As we look at Forescout as a platform, providing that device visibility and control, what we're looking to make sure that we're augmenting or having a touch point in your own enterprise is oftentimes that asset management. You have an understanding of what those devices were when you plug them up, but we need to know where they are and how they are connected. Do we have an understanding of the device's compliance? What if something happens to that device while it's on my network? Do I have the ability to do some level of network access control? And is it communicating, and do I have a permissions or a path for some level of network segmentation that limits maybe the exposure or limits the communication path for those devices to connect to my critical resources? The other area that we're being constantly called into is if something does go wrong and there is an issue, how quickly can Forescout help as part of that incident response? Our real-time contextual information that we're providing and the intelligence is starting to be brought into play as we start to enumerate and understand all the devices and assets that are out there, right? The ability to take that information and be able to make some determination is going to be critical across all these different extended enterprise environments. This is where the IXIA communication with Forescout provides real insight, right? We're providing a lot of information from network traffic that IXIA is able to see and then provide back to Forescout in real time. We can take and ingest some of that information around that traffic and become that much more intelligent. So how does Forescout optimize that security operations, right? How do we provide this real-time visibility on the devices that are connecting and provide some level of context back to the enterprise as it starts to evaluate those endpoints? So first off, what Forescout does, and we're critical from an IXIA perspective, is the discovery of all the devices within the enterprise, right? All network connected devices, we want to be able to provide some level of information around those devices and get that information back as quickly as possible to Forescout. We'll pull multiple locations and be able to take that information in, but IXIA is one of those core capabilities from the ability to take that information from IXIA and bring it into Forescout. It provides some real great information as we move from discovery into classification. I want to understand and be able to categorize appropriately all the different types of devices. Whether you're a camera or a tablet or a server, I may need to be able to understand how you fall into my classifications from a Forescout policy perspective moving forward. As I start to take a look a little bit deeper at those assets, now I'm starting to evaluate maybe their operating systems or the apps that may be running on them. Do you have an agent that I'm evaluating the communication path of? And is there even user information that I can find out about those devices that would help me in real time understand what that device could be? So Forescout looks at it in a couple different ways, and I want to make sure you guys understand how Forescout does that. First of all, we're an agentless solution. There's no device agent that's going to be required, right? We're going to look at the information in an intelligent, in both a passive and active way. So meaning passively, we're going to capture that information from IXIA and then maybe actively go out and ask for little bits more information from the endpoints themselves directly. We do this across all different types of network technology that we're integrated within, and obviously we've expanded this way beyond just the campus into the data center and now into cloud and OT. The best part from a ForScout perspective is how we provide some intelligence around what we've found. How do we look at that classification? And the way that we do this today is we've had multiple customers provide information back to us. I said earlier, I've talked a little bit about Device Cloud. And Device Cloud is our way for all of our customers to provide a fingerprint back to ForScout about the devices that they're seeing. It helps us build better intelligence that we can then share back out with our customers. It's a completely opt-in capability, but the customers that provide the information back to ForScout, we're then able to turn around and provide that information back out to our other customers around the types of devices and the fingerprinting that we're seeing. The other really critical capability that ForScout provides is we're doing this continuously. This is not a point-in-time scan. We're doing this in real time, and we don't need to wait for a scan to complete or for somebody to notify us because they're an agent-based solution. We're going out and evaluating this, and we're taking the information from what the enterprise provides to us and building this information in our policy engine consistently.
Thanks for that, Tim. Now let's take a look at some easy ways to build intelligent visibility into your network for proper monitoring. To start with, intelligent visibility solves the data access and distribution problem. So in this simple diagram, we have a typical data center setup with a spine and leaf switch arrangement, which could represent many unmonitored segments. The first thing we need to do is put network taps on every single network link that we want to monitor. This could include physical taps at the top of a rack switch between your data center and your core network, and even virtualized taps in your virtualized servers. This would allow us to capture that north-south traffic as well as that east-west traffic that oftentimes gets missed. So now that we have taps across your entire network, what do we do with all that data? Well, what we do is we send it to what we call a network packet broker. A network packet broker is a powerful device that's designed to do some basic functions as well as some advanced capabilities. At the very basic level, we could aggregate all that traffic into one centralized location for data delivery to a single monitoring tool. We could also bridge the gap between data rates so that you're capturing 10 gig traffic and maybe sending it to a 40 gig tool. Usually when there's congestion challenges, we could also load balance the traffic across multiple tools so that you can get that capacity that you need. In some more advanced scenarios, we can actually decrypt SSL traffic for monitoring. We could deduplicate packets so as to not overburden the performance of the monitoring devices connected to it. And we can even generate net flow data at the application level for advanced capabilities. So the Intelligent Visibility Framework really gives all of our tools full visibility of what's happening in the network in a very efficient way. Over the last several years, networks have evolved to make way for new technologies. The network perimeter is pretty much deteriorated to make way for things like the cloud, the edge, virtualization of your applications, and even the explosion of IoT devices. This digital transformation has added more compute power at the edge, so your traditional hub and spoke architecture is no longer a universal standard. As networks evolve, so does your visibility fabric. And one common example of this is that, let's say in aviation manufacturing, these factories produce terabytes of data as they manufacture and test their plane parts and airplane engines. And it's impractical to just backhaul that traffic back to your data center or even send it up into the cloud. We propose that you have a visibility fabric that extends into the cloud and at the edge. And in this scenario, you wouldn't necessarily need to have the high-end, high-density packet brokers that you would have into the core, but instead we propose having a smaller footprint at the edge. But having that smaller footprint allows you to have that end-to-end visibility from core, cloud, and to the edge. And at the heart of all of that visibility fabric is really simplicity. When it comes to the operation of the packet broker, we want to make sure it's as easy as possible. It's been widely discussed that the skill set in the cybersecurity industry is scarce as it is. So simplification benefits all involved, from the security operations teams to the network operators. Really what we're trying to do here is to bring simplistic operation to an otherwise very sophisticated set of functions and advanced capabilities. Remember, we're talking about aggregation, filtering at layer 2 to 7, load balancing, and deduplication. So it's important that we focus on a user interface that's drag and drop versus focusing on long, confusing lines of CLI. One of the benefits of doing that means that we prevent filter overlaps, which could take away rule sets from other filters. And doing it in a very intelligent way means there's also no drop packets. Remember that the bad guys only need to be right once, but we need to be right all the time. So error-free operation is a must in cybersecurity monitoring. And we talked a little bit about how we extract the data from the network and the various different methods we would apply to aggregate them and filter them and deliver them. Now we can take a look at the operation from a slightly different perspective and talk about why it's important for Forescout, the Forescout platform, to ingest the data in that fashion. In this slide, we talk about a variety of different ways that the Forescout platform can ingest data, from SNMP traps to flow analysis. But at the end of the day, we believe that the packet level data is still really the best in terms of having a holistic view of your network, the devices within it, how they interact and behave with one another and in and out of the network. The truth of the matter lies in the packets, and the packets don't lie. And we believe that that's really the optimum way of doing data collection. As you expand the network infrastructure as well, from the data center to the branch to the cloud, we maintain that level of importance on the packet. So whether you're at the branch or in the cloud or an OT environment, we believe that there's still tremendous value in monitoring that packet. And so we've made sure that we would build a visibility architecture that can spread across all of those different facets. Now, I talk about packet level data, but I have to caution that not all packet data is created equal. And so when you take a look at different methods of collecting packet level data, there's really two that are predominant. The span port traffic that you can get from a layer 2, layer 3 switch is probably the most common. It's the default option that people fall to. And then there's our method, which is your intelligent visibility fabric that you encapsulate across your entire fabric. We understand that span ports are still very much practical and relevant today. It is available, like I said, on many layer 2, layer 3 switches, but it's just not, from our standpoint, kind of the best practice in terms of monitoring for security. First of all, not every span port is potentially available to you when you need them. Usually they may have already devices hanging off of them. It's difficult to get a configuration scheduled. And span port traffic doesn't send you everything. It eliminates a lot of the layer 2 errors, layer 3 errors that occur, and sometimes that creates gaps in the traffic that you want to see. And it's known that hackers can hide malicious traffic in these unmonitored gaps. And so that's not, to me, really 100% visibility in terms of building a proper security operation. And oftentimes there's low reliability on span ports because, if a switch gets overburdened, that function is usually the first one to drop. And so you can't just intermittently go down in what would otherwise should be a 24/7 security operation. So all of those issues go away when you build a purpose-built visibility fabric that's leveraging TAP technology and packet broker technology, where those are always running constantly, and they're at your control and configured and modified whenever you need them by you. And so, a lot of the ways that the Forescout platform can benefit from all of this is that rather than just monitoring from a single access point, you're accessing traffic from everywhere in your network. instead of being able to discover devices in a delayed fashion, you're able to discover them in real time. You have a centralized monitoring operation versus very distributed. And you can see there from a filtering standpoint, span parts don't even have that capability where the packet brokers can give you all of those advanced functions. From a reliability standpoint, the growth is probably one of the big benefits where we can scale to whatever the needs are of the environment, where span ports are very limited. At the end of the day, overall, all of these things add up to making sure that the monitoring devices that are connected to us operate with 100% effectiveness, because we can perform all of these functions on our own and deliver clean data to these devices versus them having to do them on their own, and reducing the amount of intelligence that it can actually perform because it has all that overhead. At the end of the day, the intelligent visibility fabric is really what we are promoting. So as a result of that combination of the visibility fabric plus the Forescout platform, really what that gives you is faster time to insight. You're able to detect devices as they come online immediately versus guessing when and where they are. Having a holistic view of all of the digital assets you have in your environment allows you to have that threat detection in real time and minimize any impact on performance to the networks to maintain business continuity. As I mentioned, that whole scalability factor where we can grow with you and not have to worry about scaling up or scaling down or having the limitations to do so. Really, at the end of the day, this is the proper way of building a formalized visibility architecture combined with proper security operation.
So great. Now that you can see everything, what's next? This is often a question that Forescout gets, right? I've gone in and now I've done some great discovery and I understand what's out there. What do I want to do with this information? How do I start to look at automating my threat response? What kind of information is going to help Forescout implement your policies that are going to map back to what you have from a security perspective in terms of the enforcement around the compliancy of your endpoints? So Forescout addresses this in a couple different ways, right? We look at kind of from the most far left modest notifications to a little bit more restrictive, strong on the far right. And we'll do this at both the network layer as well as the host layer. We take a little bit different approach to this, right? Where I have the ability to email administrators or send notifications onto your SIM through syslog or Ceph messaging. I can share a lot of my information with IT systems or other help desk information. Just simply notification level. Maybe it's a notification to the end user themselves, redirecting them to a web page that says, hey, please don't do that again, or sending a notification to the end users via email. These are all easy ways to start to have some level of compliancy or some level of enforcement based on some of the policies when devices that you've identified as part of your assets that are on your enterprise we need some level of automated response. From a conformity perspective, we look at kind of moving guests around within the enterprise. Maybe you connect to a network and need to be moved to another VLAN. As part of that, we'll also look at some of the hosts themselves and making sure, hey, have I started all the correct agents when I connect to your enterprise? Maybe I have a policy around mandatory applications or processes running, and Forescout can be able to has the ability to go ahead and look at those endpoints and do some level of visibility and understanding around the compliancy enforcement that's going to be required. At the real stringent level, in terms of the strict capabilities, something bad has happened to an endpoint, and we're all in agreement that this device needs to be quarantined. We have the ability to leverage VLANing, and we could move those devices quickly into a quarantine VLAN. Maybe it's turning that device off in its entirety. I could take an action at the switch layer and leveraging 802.1x or or an ACL that's going to restrict that device from being able to communicate any further on the device itself or on the enterprise itself. Maybe at the host level on the endpoint, now I've terminated an unauthorized application. Maybe I've disabled its capability to talk on its wireless and wired connection at the same time. Maybe I've even gone in and blocked some level of access based on your login credentials. So a lot of times we see that's over a virtual VPN connection, right? I have the ability to take those block actions, based on the device authentication, and maybe no longer allow for those devices to stay on the enterprise. These are how a lot of our teams are starting to automate once they've gotten that level of visibility to ensure their policies are enforced across their enterprise. Again, ForScout Device Insight is an understanding around the device classification. I think I mentioned this a few times earlier in the conversation around our device cloud. And what we've done is we've built a classification taxonomy that helps provide some insight around where our customers are seeing from a visibility perspective on the devices connecting to the enterprise. That's all this is, a little chart. I wanted to kind of point out the fact that we've really improved our classification by function and vendor and operating system. We've had a couple different versions of code released in about the last 2 years. As we moved from version 8 to version 8.1, we saw a real improvement in the ability to understand different operating systems that are going to be showing up into the enterprise, right? We've gone over 500 different operating systems that we're seeing today, right? The other fascinating one is we're seeing over 5,000 different types of devices, models, understanding kind of the capability that this is going to have in your organization, and pinning down and knowing that these types of devices exist is really critical moving forward.
Thanks for that, Tim. And as we wrap up this session, hope you don't mind us having a little bit of fun and leave you with some memorable images, reminding you of why Ixia and ForScout are better together. As made famous by the quote from Dorothy in the movie The Wizard of Oz, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. We certainly hope that you don't have that fear of embracing the change in today's world and identify those undiscoverable IoT devices in your network. And those unsecured IT and OT environments can propose potential threat vectors. So working with Ixia and ForScout, we want you to come away with a feeling of confidence, knowing that you'll be smarter with the who, what, when, and where of the activity that's happening across your entire environment. And that reduced risk and optimized performance is really at the heart of the operation. And certainly we want you to have that courage to embrace that change and that innovation that's happening in today's world and to make your businesses more successful. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much to our presenters for walking us through the details on how to see and secure it all. And a big thank you to our audience for your time. We want to ensure you have all the tools you need to become a wizard of your network. So if you have any questions, please ask them using the chat window, and we will take them momentarily. If we do not answer your question during this broadcast, we will do so via email after the event. While some of you submit your questions in the chat window, I wanted to ask the others in our audience to please take the survey and let us know more about you and what you liked about the event and how we could improve. Additionally, we have some links on the screen and in the resource section, so if you want to get more info or connect direct with any of our solutions experts, please click on any of those links. And now we are ready to take questions. First question goes to Ixia. You mentioned you have an integration with SIMS. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, sure. I'll address that. Yeah, one of the things that we've started to see over the past couple of years is a trend in CIOs wanting to establish more automation into their environments, more particularly in their security operations environments. And there's been a growing trend in kind of what they call SOAR, which stands for Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response. You can see that some of these big SIM vendors in the industry have started to add SOAR capabilities to their portfolio. Splunk, for example, purchased the Phantom solution, IBM with their QRadar, more recently Palo Alto with their acquisition of Demisto. And so there are a number of solutions out there in the marketplace today, and our packet broker and our intelligent visibility fabric has integrated with those specifically so that these SIM solutions can essentially change and control policies on the packet broker when needed. A good example of that may be when a SIM sees an indicator of compromise that might be worth further investigation. That SIM can communicate to our visibility fabric through our packet broker and make changes to its policies and filtering so that it can start to capture that indicator of compromise and redirect and start doing packet recording for, let's say, a forensics tool for further investigation. So those are the types of integrations that we have with SIMs today.
Thank you. Next question. Why is data masking or dedupe important when sending traffic to the Forescout platform?
Yeah, so when our visibility fabric collects traffic from the network and sends it to the Forescout platform, we pretty much send all the packets, which means it's all the data that's included in all those packets. Now that includes everything that you need to see, but it also includes potentially confidential information that might not be relevant for certain security monitoring operations. So, things like credit card data or social security information, we would imply data masking to hide that information, which in turn would allow the security operators to meet the stringent privacy needs or compliance regulations, depending upon what vertical you're trying to address. And then things like deduplication is important. Dedupe is a method that helps us identify and remove duplicate packets in the network, especially during backups or certain complex designs are inherent with duplicate packets. And so all duplicate packets do is it ingests the monitoring operation. So when we remove it, we greatly enhance the efficiency of that monitoring device, which would otherwise be overburdened and potentially drop, mission critical information.
Great, thank you. Next question, I believe, is for Tim. What types of additional data does Forescout collect from the devices?
Sure, that's a great question. So oftentimes we're getting a lot of information being sent passively to Forescout, but we'll also go out and evaluate some additional data elements that may not necessarily have been obtained through those passive measures. So these include operating systems or applications that may be installed, the versioning, maybe things to include like the user that's logged into those devices, as well as any other device configurations down even as low a level as the registry setting. With all that information now, we can start to get a little bit better understanding as to what's maybe happening on those endpoints. And as we collect some of that data back into Forescout, it starts to round out the full profile around those endpoints so that we now have kind of an ability to ensure those applications are installed and running, or agents are up and communicating. All of that starts to be that much clearer to Forescout as part of that device collection.
Thank you. Next question. Does Forescout automatically correlate the additional device data with all the data from Ixia?
Yeah, it does. Actually, what we'll do is we will take the information via policy information or the policy engine that runs within Forescout and bring that information kind of back into the data structure that Forescout has, so we can understand a little bit more where that data and what kind of data we've gotten from sources like Ixia, and then what other information we've had to go out and obtain through other mechanisms. So as we bring all this data back in, we'll have a better understanding in terms of being able to kind of enforce a policy or a compliancy setting, or make sure that the device has been located into its proper segment. The great part about all of this data that ends up in Forescout, we can take some of this information and provide some level of context and feed those in to other solutions, right? The CMDBs of the world, the ServiceNows or Splunks, where long-term storage and trends starts to be provided, we can provide that context around all of that information based upon that device data that Forescout's receiving, not only from Ixia, but also from some of the information that we're able to correlate as well.
Thank you very much, Tim and Dennis. That is all the time we have for questions. A reminder that if we did not get to your question, we will answer it via email. If you want more information about Ixia or Forescout, please visit the Resource tab. Thank you again to our audience for joining us. We hope you have a great day.